What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to do something quite different from my usual style of content where of course I'd either shoutcast my own battles or viewer submitted battles, and instead I'm going to be looking at ways to fix 10 of the most useless glass cannon Pokemon in the game right now and give them movesets that won't necessarily be enough to make them top meta, but will at the very least make them a lot more viable and likely very fun Pokemon to use. Now if you've ever watched Yonkers, he does this type of hypothetical videos quite a lot towards the end of the season, and they're some of my favourite videos of his, so shout out to him as he definitely gave me the inspiration for this video. Now I do want to mention I'm only going to give these Pokemon moves that already exist in the game, and of course they have to learn these moves in the main series games. I can't just go around adding Rage Fist and Aura Will to every single Pokemon. Unfortunately it doesn't quite work like that. And one final thing I want to mention is that all of the moves I'll be adding will be exactly as they are in the game right now. I'm not looking to buff any moves, I'm just going to add different moves to their move pool. Now if you would like to see a part 2 where I look at actual moves that could be buffed instead to make other useless Pokemon a lot more viable, please do let me know in the comment section down below, as of course I mentioned this isn't my usual style of video, and actually it took me way longer than I was expecting to put it all together, so this was intending to be yesterday's video, but it is what it is. But speaking of something that is more my style, that takes us into today's video sponsor, Into the AM. Into the AM is a clothing brand that I've personally been wearing both on and off camera for just over a year now, and I have to say I just love the feel of their tees and shirts. The shirt I'm wearing right now is probably the nicest feeling shirt that I've ever owned, made from a really light material with a 4-way stretch. It's just the perfect shirt for the summer. Currently, Into the AM have a Memorial Day sale running until the 1st of June where everything is at least 25% off, with some items being all the way up to a whopping 70% off. If you're looking to get some new fits for the summer, some of these offers are just too good to turn down. Speaking of the shirt I'm wearing right now, originally this relaxed button-up would have cost me nearly £40, which is actually a reasonable price for the quality of the shirt, but Into the AM have a mystery button-up option where you don't choose the exact pattern, but you will get it for just £10, which I think is a really cool option. Previously, I'd only ever worn the graphic and plain tees, but at £10, I just had to get myself a relaxed button-up shirt, and whilst this probably wasn't the pattern I would have chosen myself, I actually think it looks way better in person, and now I'm absolutely going to be ordering a few more of these shirts. On top of this huge sale, you can also use the code TOAST at the checkout to get a further 10% off your order. I'll leave a link in the pinned comment of this video, but there's actually also a link in every video, and you'll also see my discount code pop up on the screen throughout every single video. Obviously they don't just do button-up shirts, so here are a few other tees from Into the AM, and do note last time I promoted Into the AM I wore a medium, but I have bulked up quite a bit since then, so I am now wearing a large. Anyways, with that being said, let's just get into the question of the day. Which Pokemon, glass cannon or not, that is completely useless with its current move pool would you like to see get a substantial buff next season? And if you have any ideas as to how they could buff this Pokemon, please let me know in the comment section down below. And with that being said, let's get into the first buff. Okay, so first off, you've probably seen it in the thumbnail already, but I think both Murkrow and Honchkrow could do with a huge move update. If you've been a fan of the channel for a long time, you'll know Shadow Honchkrow used to be my go-to Pokemon for nuking Pokemon out of the sky. It was so fun to run back in the day, but unfortunately it's not aged very well, and of course Sky Attack getting nerfed into the ground hasn't really helped it out at all. His cheapest energy charge move is now Dark Pulse at 50, and Snarl just has no fast move pressure whatsoever. Murkrow on the other hand has cheaper moves, but his fast moves are both incredibly underwhelming, so I'd love to see both Pokemon gain access to Sucker Punch and Night Slash. As of right now, Thievul is the only Pokemon in the Great League that learns this combination, and it would genuinely skyrocket the Shadow Murkrow line from unusable Pokemon to genuinely strong meta picks. Now if we take a look at both Pokemon in the One Shield scenario before and after adding Sucker Punch and Night Slash, it is actually an insane improvement. I mean, look at the Shadow Murkrow, 6 wins and 39 losses against the meta without these moves, and then 27 wins and 18 losses. That is a huge upgrade, and that is definitely the biggest percentage increase in terms of win rates throughout the video. So unfortunately the rest of these Pokemon, they're not going to be quite as huge buffs as these two, but this is something that I would love to see. Now as I've just mentioned, most of the Pokemon on this list are not going to see huge transformations in terms of their win-loss record against the meta, but you just have to think about Pokemon like Shadow Cacturn currently. In simulations, it's really not that great, but in practice, give it a shield advantage or energy advantage in a matchup where it's not taking super effective fast move damage, and it can absolutely run through teams. Alright, so next up, we've got the Shadow Abra line. Something I forgot to mention was if the full Evo lines are unusable glass cannons, I'll just choose moves that can be given to the full family, as that's something Niantic has done in the past. Now, Alakazam used to be somewhat viable prior to the counter nerf, but unfortunately, its new pacing has just completely killed it. But currently, Kadabra, which is even more attack weighted than Alakazam, is one of the worst ranked Pokemon in the game, and is just completely unusable in any even shield scenarios. And Abra, if you didn't know, is actually the third highest attack weighted Pokemon in the entire game, behind Deoxys and Pheromosa, and it's too frail to even have a ranking. And with Charge Beam as its best fast move, as you can imagine, it is just completely awful and completely unusable. So that's why I'm going to give the full evolution line of access to both Psyshock and Psywave. Now, do note, Abra does actually already learn Psyshock, so I'm just going to give it to Kadabra and Alakazam, but on these Pokemon, those Psywaves will feel like Dragon Breath damage, and with Psyshock getting buffed this season, they'll be able to apply insane damage at a very fast rate. Now on screen right now, we have the Zero Shield scenario, and look at Shadow Abra getting 20 wins in the Zero Shield scenario, pretty much the glassiest Pokemon in the game, actually beating 20 of 45 Pokemon in the meta in the Zero Shield scenario. It's actually really impressive. Of course, it's not over a 50% win rate, but you just look at the Pokemon that it can now beat in the Zero Shield. You got Blastoise, you got Dugong, you got Feraligatr, Furret, Gastrodon, Golisopod, Marowak, Quagsire, Tinkaton, and Wigglytuff. That is actually pretty insane. Obviously, the rest of them are actually going to be weak to the Psychic typing, so that does make a lot of sense. But either way, that is a huge improvement, and these Pokemon would just be so fun to run. Next up is the Colossus line. Now, unfortunately, these guys have been completely shafted in the fast move department, having a choice of either Hidden Power or Zen Headbutt, two of the worst fast moves in the entire game. Their charge moves are actually very decent, but the fast moves severely hold them back. Of course, it would be very easy to just give them Psywave again, but they'd basically just be clones of the Abra line that I just showcased, so instead, I've gone with the fast move rollout. As you can see, they still don't have the greatest record ever. This is in the one shield scenario, but just imagine a situation where they get a farm down up against a Pokemon on low health. Those Psyshocks are going to come at an insane rate, and it will just be so fun to use. Next up, we have the Shadow Archon line. When these Pokemon first released as Shadows, that was genuinely one of the most enjoyable times I've ever had testing out a new Pokemon, as for whatever reason, I just kept on getting Ancient Power boosts in pretty much every single game, but obviously, that was just incredibly lucky, and since then, unfortunately, Weird Attack has been nerfed, and it really hurts these Pokemon, so I've decided to give them both Shadow Claw, one of the best fast moves in the game, and Rock Tomb, a move that probably will get nerfed next season, or at least, I kind of like it to, maybe just a slight damage nerf there, but either way, it would still be a huge improvement for both of these Pokemon. Once again, you don't see a huge improvement in terms of their win rate in even shield scenarios. I believe this is the one shield scenario here, but it still would be so much fun to use. Next up, we have Shadow Trapinch. Not the full Evo line, just Trapinch. Now, if you didn't know, XL Trapinch is an insane glass cannon, and currently it actually has a decent moveset, but it still just gets destroyed by pretty much everything in the Great League meta. However, if we give it Mud Slap, I believe this would be the most attack-weighted Pokemon to learn Mud Slap, and whilst it's not a very good move, Sand Tomb in the two-shield scenario with Mud Slap would be an absolute monster. This thing would just completely destroy a ton of Pokemon in neutral situations. Next up, we've got Shadow Excelgor. Now, this Pokemon had a community day fairly recently, but that made no difference to its viability. Unfortunately, it still sucks. Strangely, aside from Greninja, I believe Excelgor is the only other Pokemon that learns Water Shuriken, and obviously it's non-stab, but it's a very good fast move, but it just doesn't have that same spam capability as Greninja because its charge moves just cost so much energy. So instead, I'm going to give this Pokemon access to Swift. I think this is really the only cheap charge move that it can learn that's already in the game right now, and this would completely transform this Pokemon in the two-shield scenarios, as it can now finally spam charge moves. Next up is Shadow Anorith, a Pokemon that you probably forgot even existed. Now, this Pokemon actually has Aqua Jet, which is obviously a move that got buffed this season, now a really good coverage move, but Struggle Bug and Rock Blast really hold this Pokemon back, so giving it access to both Fury Cutter and Rock Tomb would finally make this Pokemon a lot more usable. It would work very similar to XL Kabuto, which I've showcased a few times this season, and it doesn't really have the greatest ranking, but it is genuinely so fun to run, and honestly performs a lot better in practice races rather than in simulations. Next up, we've got Shadow Stalk, the Pokemon that gave me the idea for this video, the karate Pokemon that doesn't learn Karate Chop. I know, it's a baffling choice, and someone actually pointed out in that video, Stalk doesn't even learn Body Slam in the main series games, but it's such an unpopular Pokemon that no one's really kicked up a fuss about it, so it still has the illegal moves even today. Obviously, I'm going to give this Pokemon Karate Chop, and then for coverage, I'm going to give it access to Ice Punch, which works really well. I know it's not particularly creative for a fighting type to have Ice Punch, but it's just the coverage that it really needs. And as you can see in the One Shield scenario, that is a huge transformation, but if you actually look at the matchups, it's now just beating the Pokemon that it should be beating, and as well, a few Pokemon where Ice coverage comes in handy. You do lose the matchup up against the Azumarill, but I mean, who really cares about that? Next up, we have a Pokemon that I already mentioned earlier in the video, and that is Pheromosa. I've done a lot of Glass Cannon Roulette videos and streams, and every single time without fail, Pheromosa is by far the hardest Pokemon to use. Don't get me wrong, when things align perfectly and you can nuke a Pokemon with close combat, it can feel incredibly satisfying, but for the insane attack stat that this Pokemon has, the Bug Bites just don't feel like they do as much damage as you'd expect, and that's largely down to Bug being the most resisted typing in the game. So I'd love to give this Pokemon access to Double Kick, as of course, I mean, just looking at the Pokemon, Double Kick seems like a perfect fit for it. As you can see, it still doesn't really help this Pokemon out that much. I believe this is the Zero Shield scenario, but at least getting to the close combat a lot faster, and fighting type fast move damage is a lot more valuable than Bug. Also, Lunge plus close combat is a deadly combination for the opponent to try and figure out whether they want to shield or not. However, unfortunately, both moves are going to be resisted by a lot of common Pokemon in the meta. And now for the final Pokemon, we've got Kartana, and this is probably one of the more usable Pokemon on this list, but it is incredibly one-dimensional. It's a Razor Leaf user, it deals a lot of fast move damage, but even with cheap charge moves, it's probably not going to be reaching more than 2 charge moves, but giving it access to a faster charging fast move could give this Pokemon a completely different playstyle. I've actually given 2 suggestions for this in Fury Cutter and Psycho Cut, and as you can see, they both really improve its Zero Shield matchups, and actually it is now able to reach charge moves, so it's not that surprising. You can see it basically just beats the Pokemon that you would expect it to be given the typing that it has, as well as Primate with Psycho Cut, which is actually very cool to see in the Zero Shield scenario. But either way, yeah, obviously in the 2 Shield scenario, it's probably going to struggle a lot more than it used to do, just because you can't fast move farm down Pokemon anymore, and given that it has like 72 or like 80 HP in the Open Great League, it probably will be farmed down in that time anyways. But still, I think this is a really cool improvement, and it's more of like a side grade rather than an upgrade strictly, because of course Razor Leaf is just pretty viable on this Pokemon. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. So if you did enjoy it, please make sure to leave a like. Of course, let me know if you think there are any Pokemon that I've missed from this list that have pretty obvious choices for moves that could be used to upgrade these Pokemon to make them a lot more viable. If I didn't include a Pokemon on this list, either I feel like its moveset is somewhat viable to the point where it is at least fun to use, or there's just no saving it with moves that are currently in the game right now. It would need completely new moves, or for moves to be reworked to actually make them viable. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. And if you want to take your support even further, you can now become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has already become a channel member. Your support is greatly appreciated, and with that being said, thank you all so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.